Good evening, everybody. I'm Sheila Gunn Reid, and welcome to The Gun Show. Now, as conservatives, we like to pride ourselves on being the ideology of free and liberal exchange of ideas. We like to say that we think good ideas stand up to scrutiny and debate, and that we certainly don't shy away from a good, civilized debate. We say we don't believe in censorship, even for people we disagree with. Now, I like to think that's true for the majority of the conservative movement, but what happens when our conservative thought leaders don't support free speech and accountability when we call upon them to do so? What happens then? Now, tonight I'm bringing you a wild story of political censorship, a whisper campaign, and accusations that a conservative think tank isn't passing the litmus test when defending our fundamental freedoms. Tonight, I'm bringing you the crazy story of Jim Karahalios. Karahalios is an Ontario conservative activist. He's the founder of two grassroots conservative movements. One is called Axe the Tax, which of course is an anti-carbon tax movement. And the second movement is called Take Back Our PC Party, targeted at making the Ontario PC Party accountable to its own grassroots membership. Now, both of these movements should be something grassroots conservative activists consider mainstream ideas, right? Low taxes, accountability from our own leadership. Seems like pretty reasonable stuff, but Karahalios says that because of his activism to hold Ontario PC leader Patrick Brown accountable, both of his organizations have been banned from having booths at this year's upcoming Manning Center Networking Conference. Karahalios spoke to me earlier this week to tell me his side of this wild story. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining me. I'm Western-based, so a lot of people might not know exactly who you are. Why don't you give us a brief little bio of who Jim Karahalios is and how long you've been with the PC Party in Ontario?
Thanks, Sheila. So I'm happy to be on the show. I've been actually involved in Ontario politics, conservative politics, both federally and provincially with the Ontario PC Party for about 15 years. And last year, or in the beginning of the year in February, I actually started a national campaign called Axe the Carbon Tax. Obviously, it's what the name says. It's opposed to carbon pricing of any kind. And it's really a national campaign talking about all the political players on carbon taxation. And halfway through the year, in the summer of 2017, I got involved with a Ontario-specific campaign called Take Back Our PC Party, which is really geared towards the Ontario PC Party and some troubles we're having there in Ontario.
So you mentioned briefly your Take Back the PC Party. Why don't you explain a little bit about that? Because some of the criticism is that it is divisive. It's going to cause a fracture in the PC Party. Is that your intent with with the movement that you're trying to start?
Well, actually, I originally started Axe the Carbon Tax before Take Back Our PC Party, and it started in Manitoba. And if anyone in Canada wants to find out who's been giving political cover to Justin Trudeau to mandate a carbon tax right across Canada, you don't have to look any further than Ontario PC leader Patrick Brown. When Patrick Brown was running for the PC Party leadership in Ontario, he was against the carbon tax. And he even said, and I quote, "Never again are we going to see a policy imposed on the grassroots of the party from Toronto without the grassroots having input." And as soon as he became leader, the first chance he got, he advocated for a carbon tax. And he really did give Trudeau cover to mandate a carbon tax across Canada. We all know Trudeau's majority runs through Ontario. And what Brown did is he rolled out the red carpet for Trudeau. Brown announced his carbon tax policy months before Trudeau said he was going to mandate it. So it wasn't surprising that a few months later, Trudeau looked at the landscape, looked at no provincial party leader in Ontario was going to oppose him on a carbon tax, and he decided to make a carbon tax mandatory. But like you said, the trouble with Patrick Brown didn't stop at his carbon tax and his war on the grassroots with policy. Then he went after something as basic and as simple as nominations. Everyone in Canada who gets involved in a political party knows that when you go to vote at a nomination meeting, it matters. It means something. You're selecting and you're voting the candidate that's going to represent your party and your riding come election time. Well, in Patrick Brown's PC party, party constitutions don't matter. He just misrepresented Ontario election law. And him and party president Rick Dykstra decided that if they want to overrule or ignore the votes at a nomination meeting, or if there are allegations of ballot box stuffing or voter fraud or vote rigging at a nomination, they can just ignore it all, because Patrick Brown just made up this power that he has, this quote unquote legal authority to appoint candidates whenever he so pleases and ignore nomination meetings altogether. And so that's where the genesis of Take Back Our PC Party, unfortunately, is really calling conservatives to stay within the PC party, not to leave, explaining to them that under the constitution of the PC party, we can fix things from the grassroots up, and not to divide and fracture the conservative movement in Ontario, and make sure the PC Party of Ontario, which is the oldest political party in Canada, not just in Ontario, stays together for the foreseeable and the long-term future.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned the nomination process. As a conservative movement that I'm a part of, that you're a part of nationally, we were lighting our hair on fire when Justin Trudeau declared that he would have open nominations for the Liberal Party of Canada, and then lied, rescinded that promise, and was nominating whoever he felt like in the local riding. And we were rightly outraged by that. And I think you raised an important point, that purity test, that litmus test for ethical behavior, doesn't just apply to our enemies. It also has to apply to our own leaders. We have to be better than the Liberals. And as an Albertan, someone who is loudly against the carbon tax, and our conservative leadership here, whether it was the PCs or the Wild Rose, and now as the United Conservative Party, we're against the carbon tax. We're fighting against the federal government against this carbon tax. Brad Wall in Ontario, or in Saskatchewan, same thing. So it seems like a real betrayal of a nationwide conservative movement to have a PC leader in Ontario, a province we need to win, who is endorsing a carbon tax and giving permission to the Liberals to impose it in Canada's largest province.
Yeah, it really is a tragedy on multiple scales. On the carbon tax, like we talked about, he really did roll out the red carpet for Trudeau to find no opposition in Ontario when he switched his position from cooperating with the provinces to mandating it. So, you know, Trudeau's majority depends on Ontario, and when he looks in Ontario and there's no party leader that's going to oppose him, it really makes it easy for him to say, I'm going to try to make a carbon tax mandatory. And on the nomination stuff, it's more tragic, it's more concerning than just a politician changing his mind. And it's fundamental in terms of a party constitution. You know, in Ontario, we've had PC nominations, several, if not over a dozen, where reports of ballot box stuffing and vote rigging and voter fraud have come forward. One candidate sued the PC party, and that's still in the courts. The Hamilton police are now conducting a criminal probe in one nomination, and there's been many other nominations where reports of this type of activity have occurred. And instead of doing the easy thing, instead of reviewing those nominations, possibly redoing them, Patrick Brown decided to make up this big, colossal lie, this big lie that the Ontario Election Act gives him the power, the quote-unquote legal power, or the legal authority to pick and appoint the candidates that he wants. And then he said he was going to appoint half the candidates of the party for the next election. And he was going to do all that under the guise of Ontario's Election Act. And he was going to ignore these allegations of ballot box stuffing and voter fraud. Like, I can't believe it. I don't think you could believe it either, as I'm saying it. And it's worse than that. Ever since he's made his decision on the carbon tax and taken this position that nomination meetings don't matter, and he's playing fast and loose with Ontario Election Act, his poll numbers have plummeted. For 2 years now, he's been declining in his poll numbers. He's now in a statistical dead heat with Kathleen Wynne. Like, can you believe that a PC party leader in Ontario is in a dead heat, statistical tie in the polling numbers with Kathleen Wynne? Because I can't believe it.
That is a complete and utter failure. That's a failure of leadership. inability of the party itself, I guess, because the fish rots from the head down, to capitalize on these huge, immense failures in Ontario. Ontario is the most indebted sub-sovereign government on the planet. It wouldn't take a lot of work for a good Conservative party to mobilize that into a real movement to toss the Liberals out. And it's just not happening in Ontario.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Conservatives are not happy either on the carbon tax issue or on this fundamental question of nomination meetings and democracy, and opposing, obviously, voter fraud or ballot box stuffing. It's so bad that Conservatives are leaving the PC party in Ontario, and that's what Take Back Our PC party is trying to do. We've been working for months to call a general meeting to follow a process in the PC party constitution. We've had thousands of former members and current members of the PC party sign up. They're signing the petition. We're really close to getting there, to getting to the general meeting. In November, I actually sent out a letter from Axe the Carbon Tax and Take Back Our PC party to some PC party supporters. I exposed Patrick Brown's lies with regards to the carbon tax, with regards to how he's playing fast and loose and ignoring the party constitution on how we select candidates. And I told the truth. And I informed these members, former and current members, that they had the power to fix things under the party constitution, and they just needed to stay in the party. And then Patrick Brown lost it. He lost his mind. He went crazy or something. I don't know. Next thing I know, the PC party executive starts a lawsuit against me. It's the first time in Canada that I know of in my research that a political party has sued an individual, let alone one of its own party members. Then they revoked my membership. Then they barred me from entering their convention in November. Then they started a whisper campaign attacking my character to some media and to candidates in the caucus. Luckily, on December 22nd, an Ontario court judge threw out the PC party's lawsuit, and he said, quote, "It lacked substantive merit." And he said it was a strategic attempt by the PC party executive to limit my freedom of speech. So here I'm running two campaigns debating political issues, and the Ontario PC party executive and Patrick Brown collude and resort to heavy-handed tactics to try to shut down this grassroots movement.
Now, I think that brings us to the next issue. You mentioned the grassroots movement. Canada's premier grassroots political activist committee, as far as the Conservative movement goes, is the Manning Centre Conference, and that happens every single year. It's supposed to invite Conservative activists and Conservative movers and shakers from all across the country to talk about Conservative issues, how to mobilize and energize the movement and the causes that we all embrace. And you wanted to participate in the Manning Centre Conference this year as someone who is driving these grassroots initiatives against the carbon tax and to make the PC party in Ontario better and more accountable. Why don't you tell us what happened with that?
Yeah, so actually I went to the Manning conference last year, and it wasn't bad. They had a pretty good cross-section of speakers. They had a little debate on the carbon tax. The Rebels' own Raheel Raza spoke, Tom Quiggin, Mark Stein was the host. So it wasn't a bad event. And over the last year, I had Axe the Carbon Tax booth at the Rebels' own event, and I had a booth at the Conservative Party of Canada's leadership vote. And there I met Mark Cameron actually I'd met him before, but we spoke there. And he's obviously an advocate in favor of carbon taxation. And he's speaking at the Manning conference. And Mark offered to have a debate with me sometime in the future. So I thought, you know what, why not call the Manning Center and see if I can get a booth at their Manning conference in February and offer up that I'd be happy to debate or be part of a panel on carbon taxation, because they've got Dave McLaughlin speaking, who's an advocate of carbon taxation. They've got Mark Cameron there. Surely I thought they'd need someone on the other side of the debate who can usher in some debate on whether carbon taxation is the way to go or not, and who better than someone leading a national campaign against the carbon tax. So originally I said I'd like to have a booth. It seemed like in the correspondence all was well. They said the premium booth would cost $2,500, and I said, great, I'm in. And then I said, you know what? I've heard that you guys are looking for booths. I heard they were begging a couple other advocacy groups to buy a booth. So I said, I'll take two booths. I'll take a booth for Take Back Our PC party as well. And then dead silence for 2 weeks. I couldn't get a confirmation if I was going to get one or two booths. I couldn't get a response on whether they were considering letting me speak on one of their panels on carbon taxation to balance out the debate. And after 2 weeks, I called, I emailed several times, and I finally got a response. Not only are they not interested in having me speak, they're not giving me any booths. Not one, not two booths, not for Take Back Our PC Party, and not for Axe the Carbon Tax either.
And what reason did they give you? Now, full disclosure, I've seen the emails. The back and forth was pretty polite. They seemed sort of eager to have you spend your hard-earned money to participate in their conference, and then they pulled the rug out from under you. What was the excuse that they gave you?
Yeah, so I wasn't, I was going back and forth. I thought maybe if they were going to be have limited spots per booth, they tell me I can only have one booth. But you're going to love this. They email me and they say, we are always delighted to encourage and entertain wide-ranging discussions, so long as they are constructive. However, we do not accept booths which are essentially focused on interpersonal attacks and division. Thanks for understanding. Like, are these guys jokers or what? Hypocrites, really. The Manning Center decided to make an enemy of two campaigns standing up for grassroots democracy in Ontario. I couldn't believe it.
Well, and it's fascinating because you're actually trying to do something different than what happened in Alberta with our Conservative movement, and something different than what happened federally with the Conservative movement. You actually don't want to fracture the party to purify it by fire, so to speak, the way it happened at the federal level when the Reform Party broke away from the Progressive Conservatives. It was 10 years in the wilderness before we were able to put that back together and make some change. In Alberta, likewise, the Wild Rose fractured away from the Progressive Conservative Party. Now they've just united 10 good years later. You're actually trying to do the complete opposite of that. You're trying to avoid that fracture and fix it before it happens. And I think there is such a great irony in a conference at a center headed by Preston Manning, the man who led that fracture, that division in the Conservative movement so long ago, banning you from attending, or not attending the conference, but having a booth at the conference because you might be a little too divisive.
Well, look, by these standards, if they were going to apply these standards, and Manning Center was around when the Reform Party was created by Preston Manning, the Reform Party wouldn't be allowed in the Manning Center's conference, and the Wild Rose Party wouldn't be allowed either. But look, we all know that Preston Manning and the new head of the Manning Center, Rick Anderson, they've been pushing, this mad carbon tax scheme for years. They've been siding with the elites and over anti-democratic ideas and pushing anti-democratic ideas, siding with the elites instead over the grassroots is what I wanted to say. In many ways, the Preston Manning of the days of the Reform Party is like an ancient myth, an urban legend, where, if you weren't around to see it, you're not quite sure if it was true or not, because that Preston Manning is long, long gone. And then you combine that with Patrick Brown being at the conference. He's such a weak leader. He's meek. He can't take criticism. He's thin-skinned. He's intolerant of other ideas, especially conservative or democratic ideas. I mean, I did an analysis of the Election Act in Ontario, the PC Party Constitution, and a recent court decision. And I said, look, I wrote an op-ed. I said, you don't have the power, the legal power to appoint candidates. And instead of just debating with me on the analysis or saying that I was wrong, the PC Party executive tried to silence me and shut me down because they know they're wrong. So they threw the courts at me, and that didn't work. They sued me. That didn't work. The courts threw their lawsuit right out the door. So you combine those two things, the Manning Center with Patrick Brown, and Patrick Brown making his case that he's ready to blow up the PC Party just to be accepted by the liberal elite and the mainstream media, as long as they don't criticize him and they're not hard on him. He's deliberately sabotaging the PC Party and corrupting democracy and conservatism in Ontario just so he can get his way. And what's really odd is I spoke to Stephen Harper in a Calgary airport earlier this year, and he said, keep up the good work on fighting the carbon tax because there's sinister forces that are working their way and pushing carbon taxation in Canada, and it's happening within conservative circles. And I didn't really understand what he was saying. When something like this happens, I'm starting to get the point. And I guess this year the Manning Center decided to do Brown's bidding to protect Patrick Brown, to protect the idea of a Justin Trudeau carbon tax. They clearly don't want anyone there having a booth that is exposing Brown's sinister behavior. And it is hypocrisy at its finest, I think.
Well, and it's fascinating to see how little the Manning Center, me on the outside of the Manning Center looking in, how little they're actually learning from the two most successful conservative uprisings in the last year and a half on the continent. Well, I mean, we cannot overlook the success of Donald Trump being an outsider, campaigning against regulation, against carbon taxes, and he won handedly. Again, in Alberta, Jason Kenney has campaigned. The centerpiece of his campaign is that his first bill will be the removal of the Alberta carbon tax. And the Alberta carbon tax somewhere hovers around 70% unfavorability any day of the week. It's probably going to go up to more unfavorable just because it just recently got hiked. I mean, the most successful juggernauts of the conservative movement right now are those that oppose the carbon tax. And the Manning Center, it seems like it's so far away from its grassroots mandate that it is, it's just an establishment get-together right now.
Yeah, and look, the Manning Center says one of their principles is to strengthen grassroots democracy and democratic institutions.
Yeah.
It's not just in Alberta that people are against the carbon tax. Multiple polls have shown, from Angus Reid to Forum to Main Street, that in the high 50s, low 60s is the percent is the opposition to carbon tax across Canada, including in Ontario. And it's bigger, a larger number amongst Conservatives, even in Ontario. Look, no one's blaming Preston Manning for what he did in the 90s. He called out the federal BC government in Ottawa. It was corrupt. It was not being conservative. It was ignoring the grassroots. The West wanted it. That was a divisive debate. But Preston Manning was being constructive in his divisiveness. When you're debating sinister forces, that's a divisive debate. To have a proper debate on the lies behind carbon taxation, to debate Patrick Brown's corruption of democracy and the party constitution, to expose Patrick Brown's lies, that he somehow has some legal authority, which he doesn't, to appoint candidates and ignore nomination meetings and ignore ballot box stuffing. Defending democracy and defending the taxpayer is a divisive debate, but it's constructive to do so. And the Manning Center, pretending it has this principle of strengthening grassroots democracy and democratic institutions, and then telling me there's no role for me to play at their convention, either as a speaker or having a booth for either one of my campaigns, whether it's the carbon tax, axe the carbon tax, or take back our PC party, it makes their principles, their founding principles, a facade, because they're selling out on their principle in order to peddle and prop up Patrick Brown's sinister and destructive lies on both the carbon tax and on how he runs his party and governance and local democracy within a party in its nominations.
You know, and it's so fascinating. I pride myself on being a conservative because I'd like to think that true conservatives, principled conservatives, don't demand extreme and unquestionable allegiance to a leader. Our allegiance should be to our ideas and our principles. And it seems like Manning Center is demanding the opposite of you. You questioned Patrick Brown, and so now you are persona non grata at the Manning Center. As conservatives, I think our ideas are better. And because I know our ideas are better, I think they always stand up to rigorous debate. That's what's great about conservatives. We can have this free and liberal exchange of ideas and test the merits of our ideas in debate. And at the Manning Center, Canada's premier grassroots organization for conservatives, they don't believe that anymore. At least that's the perception I'm getting from what they're doing to you.
Well, you know, it's not quite clear what they're doing, except, you know, trying to make sure that Patrick Brown doesn't have any opposition, or no one's calling him out on corrupting the PC party constitution and ignoring nominations and imposing a carbon tax on conservatives, and really not being an opposition leader when it comes to carbon taxation in Ontario. So I'm not really sure why the Manning Center has decided to take their conference in this direction. I can tell you, they've accused in that email, they've accused my campaigns of having personal attacks. Well, I can tell you, I'm having a political debate and running two campaigns, and the other side, Patrick Brown and the PC party executive, have done the following things. They've sued me, and they failed. I won. I beat them in court. A judge said that their lawsuit did not have substantive merit, and it was designed to limit my freedom of speech, limit my ability to participate on a matter of public interest. They revoked my membership. They banned me from their own PC party convention. Then they went and they had a whisper campaign to media, candidates, and caucus to attack my character. So I'm asking the question, who's conducting the personal attack here? I'm trying to have a political debate on the carbon tax and the importance of nominations and voting. And the other side's taking this heavy-handed approach, trying to shut me down instead of just saying that I'm wrong in my interpretation. And the Manning Center is siding with it. And I can't understand what's going on here, because you're right, it's against their founding principle. But if the Manning Center and Patrick Brown wants to undermine the legacies of Stephen Harper and Brad Wall, and they want to undermine the campaigns of Andrew Scheer and Jason Kenney on the carbon tax, they can do that. They can shut me out of their having a booth at their conference, and they can shut me out of speaking on one of their stages. But I can tell you, if I attend, which I plan on attending, the Manning Center conference, and I go and I talk to people about Patrick Brown's fraud and corruption of grassroots democracy and trying to sue me to silence me, I think a lot of their attendees are going to want to hear what I have to say.
You know, it's so funny. As conservatives, again, we like to pat ourselves on the back as being the defenders of free speech and the defenders of uncomfortable ideas, even offensive ideas, that we, want people to have the opportunity to share their even offensive ideas in the public square, because sometimes sunlight is the best disinfectant. And the Manning Center and the PC Party of Ontario just don't have the guts, the intestinal fortitude to protect that one basic fundamental right that a judge said the PC Party of Ontario was violating.
Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunate that we can't have a debate because, like you said, conservatism means freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Bring forward your best idea. Let's debate it out. Instead of running away and hiding and ignoring these debates, let's have these debates. But it's quite clear there's certain elites in Ontario, and the Manning Center, I guess, is going to take this approach this year at their conference, which is, doesn't matter if you lie, it doesn't matter if you misrepresent Ontario election laws, doesn't matter if you pretend that you're going to bring in a carbon tax that's going to do certain things when it's not. It doesn't matter if you want to hide the fact from Ontario voters that you're going to actually raise taxes by $3 billion with a direct carbon tax, which is what Patrick Brown's planning to do over the current cap and trade system we have in place. It doesn't matter, because if I'm going to call him out on his lies and I'm going to challenge him and say, you're not reading Ontario election laws properly, you're ignoring the PC party constitution, and conservatives and Ontario voters don't want your carbon tax. They want you to have a backbone and fight Justin Trudeau, not look at him like a celebrity and welcome his ideas in here without any challenge and give up provincial jurisdiction. And instead of having a debate on these issues, they're telling me that I'm being divisive and I'm not being constructive, and we're just supposed to roll over and accept this corruption of local democracy and a PC party constitution and accept a carbon tax without a fight. And I think it's ridiculous. So,
Jim, what's next for you then? Are you appealing? Are you going as a Manning Center conference participant? I guess you said that you are. Are you going to try to have a booth next year? What's your next step?
So, look, I'm not begging anyone to give me a booth at a conference. Like I said, the PC party executive in Ontario has already sued me and they lost. I beat them in court. They've revoked my membership. They denied me entry into their convention. They've tried to do a whisper campaign about my character to the media and candidates. So my heart's not breaking because the Manning Center told me no to a booth. I'm not going to beg to have a booth. If they don't want me to have a booth, that's up to them. But you know what? I'm not going to run and hide. I'm not going to run away from these debates because of these heavy-handed tactics and collusion amongst the elites in the Ontario PC party, the Friends of Patrick Brown, and those running the Manning Center right now. I'm not going to run and hide. I think I'm going to go to the conference. I registered to attend, and I think I'm going to go. And if they don't want me speaking on the stage, maybe I'll just talk off stage to those that I meet, and I'll explain to them what's going on in Ontario, both with regards to Patrick Brown not willing to take up the fight and fight Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax. And what he's doing is he's undermining Andrew Scheer and he's undermining Jason Kenney, and he's making federal Ontario MPs, he's putting them in a tough situation where in 2018, they're going to be asked by Patrick Brown to campaign and advocate for his Justin Trudeau-style carbon tax that's going to bring in $3 billion more of government revenue than the current cap-and-trade system. And then those same federal Ontario MPs in a year are going to be going out to those same doors they knocked on to advocate for Andrew Scheer, who's saying he's going to get rid of a carbon tax. And on top of that, I think that there's a lot of attendees at the Manning Centre that are going to want to hear about the heavy-handed tactics that the Ontario PC Party executive have put on me in order to silence me in my correct analysis about the party leader, Patrick Brown, not having the power, the legal power to appoint candidates, about ignoring corruption, ballot box stuffing, vote rigging, voter fraud at local nominations, and throwing the PC Party constitution out the window. I think a lot of attendees at the Manning Centre conference are going to want to have to hear my story and about the heavy-handed tactics to shut me down. So I think I should attend.
Well, I think you should too. I am going to, just to be fair and balanced, reach out to the Manning Centre and give them an opportunity to explain themselves. But from what I've seen and what you've explained to me, it sure looks like they've been co-opted by, like you say, sinister forces who are both protecting the Liberals in the PC Party and pushing a carbon tax.
Yeah, it certainly looks like that. You know, we can only hope it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they'll change their mind. But from where I'm standing, you know, telling me that I can't get 1 or 2 booths at their conference because I'm defending a grassroots democratic process or leading one and fighting against the carbon tax doesn't look like a sound reason to deny me from where I'm sitting.
Not at all. Thanks for talking with me today, Jim, and fight on.
Thanks, Sheila.
Thanks.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Bye. Now, it's my job here at The Rebel to tell the other side of the story. I saw the email exchange between Karahalios and the Manning Centre. It was polite and cordial until they accused him of being divisive and making personal attacks. Just out of the blue. I didn't see any divisiveness in the emails to the Manning Centre, so they must be referring to Karahalios' activism against PC leader Patrick Brown. Now, I wanted to know if there was more to this story, so I reached out to the Manning Centre for their side. I asked them what the basis was for accusing Karahalios of division and personal attacks. I asked them what, if any, influence did Patrick Brown and the Ontario PCs have on the decision to exclude Karahalios from having his booths. I asked the Manning Centre how a centre founded by Preston Manning of the Reform Party reconciles a position of zero division allowed, given that the Reform movement was fractured off the PC Party of Canada. I asked why the Wild Rose Party in the past has received a prominent position at Manning Centre conferences if, again, division amongst the Conservative movement isn't allowed at all anymore. I asked how the Manning Centre reconciles their guiding principles of accountability, decentralization, and grassroots activism with their decision to block Karahalios. The Manning Centre hasn't gotten back to me yet, but I promise you, if they do, I will let you know and I will update my story. I want to hear what the Manning Centre has to say. I don't want to believe that Canada's foremost conservative grassroots activism networking conference is blocking grassroots activists because they aren't exactly towing the party line. I don't want to find out that the Manning Centre of 2018 wouldn't allow Preston Manning of 1994 to come to their new conference. If our leaders and think tanks don't respect fundamental conservative principles, it's time for us to get new leaders and some brand new think tanks. We can't expect our conservative leaders to hold the Liberals to account if those same conservative leaders refuse to be accountable to us. Thanks for joining me for this week's Gun Show. I'll see everybody back here at the very same time, at the very same place next week. And remember, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.